So you want to read the Bible, the most purchased, quoted, mocked, misquoted, loved, feared, analyzed, misunderstood, and hated book in the Western world. Reading this book requires what scholars call hermeneutics, which is a fancy term that describes the basic set of skills needed to read or understand any book: speech, piece of music, golf putt, maps, facial expression, or social situation. In biblical hermeneutics, the first step is getting a lay of the land. The book we call the Bible is actually a collection of 66 books, 39 in the Old Testament and 27 in the New Testament. But raise that number to 73 if you're Catholic, because you have an additional 7 deuterocanonical books in your Old Testament. These books are further composed of various smaller genres like laws, histories, letters, chronology, stories, poems, oracles, songs, prayers, and lists of advice, to name but a few. But knowing the landscape is only a start, because it turns out these books were not written in modern English, but in ancient Hebrew and Greek, plus some Aramaic and loanwords from Akkadian, Ugaritic, and Egyptian. Even if we don't learn the languages, it's useful to know about them, since English Bibles are largely attempts to piece together sentences and paragraphs and define words written some 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, yet without the aid of dictionaries and grammar books, which is part of the reason why modern translations all sound a little different. Then there's the equally complex phenomena of sources, since our Bibles are in fact compilations of tens of thousands of ancient manuscripts, of which the earliest ones are missing, and the ones we do have often disagree or have errors. And needless to say, these manuscripts are not typed in modern Helvetica TrueType font on standard printing paper, but in handwritten script on various forms of papyrus, stone, cloth, and pottery that have been worn away, torn, and smudged. And then there are the major historical and scientific problems of hermeneutics, like the sun rising, trees clapping, and moon and stars bowing down, which they don't naturally do, and genealogies that don't add up to the right number of years, plus descriptions of journeys that conflict with what we know about the ancient geography at the time. Putting this together, ancient genres plus linguistic distance plus thousands of differing manuscripts plus historical problems equals a book that could mean almost anything, but not so fast, because most of the linguistic problems turn out to be fairly minor and rarely impact the interpretation of larger passages. And there's extraordinary agreement among thousands of manuscripts, plus many so-called historical and scientific problems turn out to be simple failures to understand ancient cultural assumptions, genres, and metaphors, so we can rest a little easier. But not quite yet, because there's this whole problem called the new or modern hermeneutics, usually associated with scholars like Friedrich Schleiermacher, Wilhelm Dilthey, Hans Gadamer, and Jacques Derrida, which raises suspicions about historical distance of the ancient author, and the problem of the so-called objective reader, since we are, in reality, weighed down by innate biases which color and distort our reading. Yet it turns out that this new problem of hermeneutics is not really new and not so scary as it might seem. Plato and Aristotle recognized the problems of modern hermeneutics well before they were modern. These Greeks have been followed by countless scholars in every century since. And it turns out after these many years that the very awareness of these not-so-new hermeneutical problems actually made these readers much better at reading, and more likely to agree on their interpretations of the Bible. Which is all to say that the Bible may be difficult to read, but nothing any of us can't do if we're willing to read this ancient book closely and often, and be willing to test some of the new and age-old wisdom called hermeneutics.